Hey, Dominic.
Hey, Jenna.
Hey, what's up? By the way, how are you? Because today is a steamy, rainy, thunderstormy, overcast, cloudy, yet somehow still hot day. Like I'm sweating over
I'm
here.
sweating profusely. It's
Yeah,
not, thank goodness all
exactly.
you could see is my head.
And it's not even all that you know, hot today. It's actually kind of
No,
cool, but because it's so humid, just
no,
bleh.
and I have all my lights on too. It is not helping,
Um,
but I agree. I know there have been a lot of thunderstorms here, so I always get confused by that. It's just like, why does it feel it feels hotter than it did before it started raining?
Climate change journalism, man. All right.
All right.
Let's start the show. Hi, I'm Jenna,
And I'm Dom, and we're both award-winning journalists.
who've recently been laid off.
Our industry is experiencing a seismic shift, and it's shed a lot of really good journalists.
So, where does that leave us? Well, we're definitely laid off,
And we're looking for new jobs, looking for what's left of the industry, and what to do next.
and we're looking at all of it. So, if you're a fellow laid off journalist, a working journalist, or someone who admires the craft, we're looking to build community.
Develop new skills, and try to figure out what just happened.
Welcome to Laid Off and Looking. All right, so some headlines, some interesting headlines actually. And one of the ones that came across my radar was that Scripps News is planning to partner with ProPublica on an original investigative journalism. And first of all, I found this to be super exciting and interesting because investigative journalism is notoriously expensive. It doesn't always produce results. And when I say doesn't produce results, I mean you could have a journalist working, weeks or months on something, and it doesn't necessarily pan out, or the story might lead in a different direction, which is going to require even more investigative research work, etc. So the fact that Scripps News is partnering with ProPublica for this, I think, is really, really great to continue supporting investigative journalism. Anyway,
I I
yeah,
agree. No,
yeah.
I think that's important. I think it's really important. I think that's one of the that's one of the things that you always want to make sure that is being, you know, funded is investigative journalism because that's part of what,
No, it's what
we
holds
do
the
is
powerful to account.
so that's
Like, I
great to
mean, as
hear.
much as, like I could write a spot news story, like, nobody's business, but that's not gonna hold, like a
Yeah.
mayor or a county legislator or something to hold their feet to the fire. Investigative journalism is usually what gets that to happen. Anyway, so the work itself is going to be produced by the work that is being produced is going to be available on both Scripps News and ProPublica's digital platforms. And Scripps News will also be featuring ProPublica reporters on both local and national programming. So it sounds more like this is going to be ProPublica will continue kicking ass like ProPublica does, and Scripps News will basically be entering into an agreement where they will exclusively, I'm guessing, interview their reporters about whatever work they're doing. Or maybe it's not exclusive. Maybe they just get first crack at it and you'll hear it from a Scripps News channel first. But still, again, ProPublica does amazing work. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is
Most
really cool
definitely.
to hear. So anyway, the news director from Scripps News says that investigative reporting holds the powerful to account. Amen to that. And their award-winning team helps shine a light on abuse of power, corruption, and injustice. Again, this is really where journalism shows its power. It's an investigative work. So there is an example, for example, of what this might look like is a ProPublica reporter was interviewed on Scripps News about a Pulitzer Prize winning series, Friends of the Court, about some of the justices' beneficial relationships with billionaire donors, which uncovered the biggest ethics scandal in the Supreme Court modern history. Now, I think as that story unfolded, we learned a lot about the company that some of the justices keep. This does not mean that people aren't entitled to have whatever friends you want to have. But again, I keep going back to my grandparents' logic or, their lessons. And the company you keep says a lot about not only who you are, but how you see yourself in terms of the company that you keep. And can you be friends with a billionaire? I mean, I'm not, so I'm just gonna say I guess so. But yeah, sometimes some people when they get a lot of money get a little Howard Hughesy with the power that goes along with it.
Well, great. That's actually a good story to be hearing about in terms of the partnership
Yeah.
with
Well, I mean, like that was because what was it? All of the stuff that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas wasn't disclosing about
Mhm.
private jets and like houses and this guy that he's buddies with that has all of these like really weird statues of like, fascists and oligarchs in his garden and just excuse me, what? So yeah, I think that's a great story.
It
And I
is.
look forward to seeing well, I look forward to hearing more and seeing more ProPublica work.
So for me, this is actually from Boston.com. GBH, which is a public radio station in Boston, announced that they let go of 31 employees this week,
Oh
and that it
no.
would stop production on three television programs immediately. And it's a move that caught their staffers by surprise. The cuts I'm reading from the article here, the cuts across 13 departments represent 4% of GBH's overall workforce, with GBH News seeing about 10% of its staff laid off.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they have a quote here from Susan Goldberg, GBH chief executive, um, who wrote in an email to the staff late Wednesday or sometime in yet Wednesday, it says, we made these hard choices only after implementing a range of other cost-saving measures and operating efficiencies. The basic reason for these reductions is simple. Revenues are flat and costs of doing business has gone up a lot. So three of the programs, Greater Boston, Talking Politics, and Basic Black, will cease production immediately. And this is again a quote from her. We will reinvent them as digital first programming. Um, According to the station, GBH is facing a $7 million budget gap.
Yeah.
Um, so now this caught some people by
Wait,
surprise.
hold on.
It's
Wait, I'm sorry. $7 billion?
million,
Oh
seven
my God. Sorry.
million.
And my brain slowly caught up and was
No,
like, wait just a second.
no. So station leaders previously warned of potential layoffs. I think that was back in March.
Okay.
They say over
Yeah, because I
here,
remember hearing about like there were warnings, there were offers of buyouts, etc. I remember hearing the rumblings.
newsroom union steward Zoe Matthews. Oh, wait a minute.
Did you?
Uh, did you just hear that?
Yes, I did. Did you like press play on something?
I don't know. Whatever that, my,
The dreaded
uh,
pop-up.
yes, it was
Yes.
no, it was like a AI or what is it? Alexa popped up. Anyway, or Siri, I should say. Station. So yeah, so newsroom union steward Zoe Matthews told GBH the cuts were made without talks with the union and that they were blindsided. Now from Boston Herald, that also reported on the story, they said hours before the all staff note went out, radio host Jim Broad had announced the layoffs on air,
Oh.
and he said this. He said, I should say up front, this is going to be a really tough show for us today. This morning, we learned of layoffs happening at GBH. We have been told nothing by managers this morning. I repeat, absolutely nothing. It's really disturbing. We know almost nothing. So, you know, I think, here's the deal. Like, of course, layoffs are always really difficult, no matter how you handle them, um, but there
Yes, and a
are
$7
good
million
ways,
budget hole is a thing that needs to be filled.
but there are
But
good ways, there are good ways, and there are not such good ways. And it's sounding like here, people not having any idea, yes, knowing that there were signs that something was going to be happening, but just being things happen, just finding that out on the,
well,
without
first of all,
any
finding out
warning.
on the air must have been like, wait, what is happening? Um, I guess what I find the most interesting, because this is certainly not the first public media story that we've heard about layoffs. I mean, they've just been coming fast and furious as everything else has. And I would wager a very good guess that public media is going to feel market forces probably more
Mhm.
acutely, but at the same time, um, oh man, there's got to be a better way to handle this because, first of all, for public media to work, you need to have people who are willing to come into an organization and knowingly take a smaller salary and probably work more and wear more multiple hats, etc., for the sake of the mission. And just like story after story after story after story of treating people like this is not, it's just not encouraging for people to be like, yeah, you could still 100% believe in the mission, but if you're just like, but I'm just going to get tossed aside like yesterday's garbage, then why would I do that?
Yeah,
Um, and I also find it interesting learning the way these different organizations, different public media organizations handle, because not everyone is handling all of these the same way. Not everybody is offering all the same transparency. We're hearing very different stories from very different
it's true. It's
organizations.
true. Again, it goes back to, how do you treat people um, during these difficult times? Because
100%.
you cannot, obviously when there are things that just tough decisions have to be made. Okay, but there also, like you said, needs to be transparency with the people so that many aren't taken by surprise. And there's also a discussion that takes place. Are there other ways of, cutting costs? Like that was one thing I read somewhere too, where people were saying could have been other departments or other things, looking at different ways of how they could have handled this. So, um, obviously, we don't know everything, but at the same point, it sounds like people were taken by surprise and
Definitely.
not it's not the way anybody who's being laid off, that's not how you want to experience it. So anyway,
Yeah. No, well, first of all, nobody wants to
nope,
experience it. And I,
nope.
that
It just
first and
makes it even
foremost,
worse.
obviously. But yeah, it just seems like it doesn't need to be this
Right.
bad. And all of
Right.
these stories, just one after another, keeps speaking to like um a problem that was growing that wasn't perhaps being clearly communicated.
Right.
And then at the last minute, a panic and a flail.
Right.
And that's the space in which most people lose their jobs. And that's part of why it feels so crappy is that the people who are doing it, you're just trying to fix a problem that's really at a crisis point right now. But when you are in that space, you can be incredibly dismissive to the
Mhm.
people who are losing their livelihood. And that's unbelievably real in this really
Mhm.
messed up economy. But anywho, we digress. So I don't know if that really leads into our story this week, but we do
No,
have
it's
it,
okay.
it doesn't, it has nothing to do with it. But it doesn't matter. I think we've got a fun interview coming up. And so yeah, stick around and check it out. Maybe some people feel turned off by journalism because engaging with it can feel pretty slimy, perhaps pink slimy. Turns out there is such a thing as pink slime news, and it's been squirted into some local news so much that it's taken over. So, this week on the pod, Dom and I would like to welcome an expert of sorts on pink slime, Barrett Golding. Barrett, welcome to the pod.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So, Barrett is a former executive producer of Hearing Voices, an NPR distributed Peabody Award-winning series. Congratulations. You're also a Reynolds Journalism Institute and United States Artist Fellow and a WordPress contributor. Shout out to WordPress. You've also done research and written for Current, which is a digital magazine about public media, the Donald W. Reynolds Journalism Institute, PBS Media Shift, Transom, which is another digital platform about public radio, and Hackers, a blog dedicated to inspire and inform the future of media, something we aspire to, at least when it comes to the news. So, with all of that, cut to the chase. What exactly is pink slime journalism?
Well, I'm going to define it the way I define it for the purposes of the work that I'm doing, and that's fake local news. Pink slime journalism is fake local news. It's a news site online, sometimes in print, that appears to be local but isn't. So like the Tucson Star is not printed, written, has nothing to do with Tucson except it's in the name, and its intent is to attract people from Tucson. But it is part of a huge network of sites that with names that appear to be local but aren't. Fake local news. That's what I call it. Pink slime.
Okay.
Barrett, when did we start noticing these sites are popping up more?
Well, we as in human beings, about I think it was right around 2012. Not me. I came into it later, but a guy named Ryan, I got his name here, because it was Ryan Smith. Now it's Ryan Zickgraf, did a story with This American Life. He was writing for an initial early pink slime company. They've morphed over the years, called Gernactic, I think. And he did a kind of a whistleblower show with This American Life. And that's where he coined the term pink slime, which is a byproduct of the meat industry and has its
I
own
remember
set of
that story.
yeah, set of litigation. I'm not sure we're even allowed to call it that anymore. But he coined that term, and I think that was right around 2012, and it got a lot of notice for a few years, went away, but in the meanwhile, the pink slime networks have been generating more and more online sites, and again, a lot of those sites have even print publications that are associated with them.
So then if
I
so
have
many
one here.
Oh, Montana Independent. Well, that actually, but so here's one of the things, because last week we actually spoke with someone from the News Literacy Project, and we were talking about, the proliferation of misinformation and disinformation and how, people can get better at determining between the two. But one of the questions that we asked then, and I really want to ask again now, is it looks so legit. Like, is this being presented in a way that's making it intentionally difficult to be able to on the fly be like, oh, that's complete BS, or oh no, actually that looks like something that's covering my local community? And when so many local communities are losing local news coverage, that seems like that would be appealing.
So it looks legit, kinda, unless you read it. Then it doesn't so much, but it does have the look of a news site or newspaper. The articles, depending on the publication, start to look a little funny, like as if a machine could generate them, because often that's what generates a hunk of the articles, some labor statistics that could be gathered by machines. We're not talking about AI yet. That'll come a little
Oh, okay,
further.
because that was gonna be literally my next question.
But so machines can harvest material on the web, especially if it's structured well. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics annual monthly reports for jobs, that's structured very well. And machines can say, well, we have this many jobs in this area, blah, blah, blah. And you can have machines kind of generically write it. Just think of it like maybe harvesting a weather report, just the numbers, and then put some paragraph looking things around it, and you can call it an article. And that's what they do. A lot of them do. Some of them have a political bias, and so those have a little more human interaction, and they're usually either supporting an issue or a candidate, or trying to denigrate a rival candidate. So you see a little of that, but that pops in and out. I just want to say I cannot read the mind of these people or even decipher what they're up to yet. Other people have a lot of theories. I have probably all their theories and no proof for any of them. Yeah. So I forget the question. I hope that was somewhere in there.
Well, no, I mean, you did address, because especially when you were talking about, like I was saying, how do you identify it? And you were talking about the fact that it's clearly something that's written by a machine, even though AI is not a factor yet. As it gets better and better and better, does I guess, does that make it more palatable? Does that make it more, or is it intended to be this kind of not quite um article or conversational? It's not really an article, it's just kind of like printed information. Is it supposed to be that way?
Well, AI is going to help these people write cheap stories. I mean, AI really is
Mm.
just a search engine that they taught to make paragraphs. It's just a mathematical algorithm. There's nothing mysterious about it yet. You know, it's not like data on
Yet.
Star Trek. You know what I mean? That's not AI. We're not even close to that. It's just like I say, a search engine that they taught the syntax of human writing, and they teach it better and better all the time. That's wasn't what they were doing. They were just saying, sketching out an article and filling it in with the harvested data. You know, that's machine learning. Machine learning isn't, I mean, machine harvesting. That
Hmm.
wasn't composing the paragraphs. Now that it can compose the paragraphs, they should have an easier time generating these stories. I think NewsGuard says there's 850 sites that are AI generated right now. And some of them are pink slime-ish. They don't publish exactly that 850, so we can't see um, what they are. But AI should help them make uh, that should improve the readability of the pink slime. It should make better pink slime for all of us. But
In your
again,
art,
I do want to say one thing that I don't know why they're doing it. I know what they've done, and it's partially political, partially monetary. But on the other end, local news sites suck so bad. They're so slow. They look so horrible. They pop up, do you want me to come to your house? Do you want to subscribe to this? You know what I mean? The reading experience on a local news site sucks. And it's easy to compete with that. And I did some, I was looking for ability to distinguish between fake news sites and fake local sites and regular sites. And one of the things I did was look at how many ad networks. I thought, oh, these pink slime, they're just a way to suck in ads. Well, it turns out pink slime has less ad networks in play on their sites. And I thought,
Wow.
okay, maybe accessibility is another thing. Pink slime sites are more accessible. I don't know if you're familiar with accessibility, but it's the ability of any user, from a blind user to a search engine, which is both blind and deaf, to understand what the site is. And
Oh my
they're
God.
more, but the two are related because it's the ad networks that make sites inaccessible, or partially makes them slow anyway. So it's real easy to compete with a local news site because they're just horrible and they're slow and they're poorly designed.
uh, Barry, though, in your piece, you mentioned the that there's a high fail rate for pink slime sites. I think you said 97% of the domain names were recently registered, but that yet there's only like a number of them are already offline. So if if there's such a high fail rate, um, why do they keep coming back?
Are you asking me that?
Oh yeah.
Because
I was gonna say, I don't know.
you got the wrong person because I own exactly zero pink slime networks. And if I was trying to make money, I don't see the profitability in there, but they do. So to launch a domain, to register domain names,
Right.
cheap. Okay, they already have their own CMS, like Metric Media, which is the biggest one, has their own CMS, so they can kick these things out for hundreds, including human time. And I don't know how it works with somebody who has 1,000 domain names, but they may become their own registrar. So rather than paying 10 or 20 a year, they may pay even less. In other words, if they're the registrar, instead of hiring a registrar, that's how you get a domain name. You go to a registrar like GoDaddy or
Hmm.
DreamHost or something,
Hmm.
and you
Hmm.
purchase it for a year. But they could become their own registrar, and that's cheap. They have the CMS, so that's cheap. They have the ability to generate filler with machine harvestable data that's out there and generate labor statistics for individual regions. So that's cheap. So once they set up, it's cheap to launch another one, and they really don't care if one fails or not because nobody reads these things. I mean, I went and got the what was the Alexa website traffic rank. Alexa went out of business, or Alexa, owned by Amazon. Amazon doesn't do that anymore. Now it's SimilarWeb that does that. But anyway, my data
Hmm.
is Alexa, and nobody reads this stuff. Most of these sites are so untrafficked that they don't even have a rank. I think you have to be like above 30 million in global rank to not even get ranked by Alexis, the site info. So why are they doing it? I don't know.
Yeah, that's
Well,
just
I guess I say
Maybe
that
they
because
in I'm sorry, but maybe they invested and they don't want to, you know, it's like you're in the poker game and you got a lot of money on the table and maybe your hands aren't
mm,
great, but it's kind of tempting to put some more money in because you think that's your money on that table. It's not, it's communal cash now. So I don't know why. I don't
yeah, I
know.
guess I say that because you think maybe there's a reason for them to get their political message out, but then if it's nobody's reading it, then the political message doesn't really seem to matter as much then because nobody's reading it, and it seems like they don't really care about that.
Okay, so now we're into a specific case. One thing they can and do is generate an article and then have it be used by another publication of maybe not the best credibility and by a politician that you So there was where is it? The Georgia Star had an article about election fraud that got picked up by One America News. One of our former presidents, I can't remember which one, posted
his
it
name
on
slips
his,
to mind. Yeah.
yeah, one of them. We got a lot now. Posted it on a social media. It might have been his own, or maybe it was Twitter back then. And you know, that's one thing that happens. There was an article about race-based grading systems, totally made up, totally made up. Didn't exist, but it was again a One American News, the Republican gubernatorial candidate in Illinois quoted it. So it has value, and that's just a Russian tactic.
Hmm.
Russia has a similar amount of where they have less, but they come and go, and they start something and it gets picked up. And originally, I think maybe people just thought, "Oh, I believe that. I'm gonna rebroadcast it on wherever, whatever media I'm using." But now I think they care so little about whether it's correct that it's kind of a methodology now. But you
Okay.
don't see that much. There aren't that many instances.
Yeah, but still, it does beg the question. So, one of the other things we've discussed is, the ethics of journalism and who adheres to it and who thinks it's optional and things of that nature. But I guess, I don't know. I mean, it's making me wonder, how is all of this legal? Like, I just don't understand how you can. That's not true. I do understand how and why someone might want to flood the information highway, if you will, with either incorrect, misinformation, disinformation. I do understand why someone would want to do that. But I guess I just don't understand why this is just like it's just part of freedom. Like it's totally legal.
Well, I don't see it even being close to any crime that I know
Yeah.
of. So, so we should start our own and, get in on the early, yeah. And, it's not only right wing that's a whole myth about this misinformation stuff, that
Hmm.
it's somehow right wing. That's because in the last 10 or 20 years, it has been predominantly right wing, but over time, misinformation has nothing to do with party. It is a standard political ploy, and the left wing is they're maybe just not as eager to do it or not as good at it lately. But they certainly have a presence. In fact, this local paper, the Montana Independent, there's about, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10 states now. And this is a progressive publication and features glowing articles about with nice little stock pictures of people really happy about the reduced cost of prescription drugs because of Biden and Infrastructure Week and and how
Huh.
good Tester is and things like that. In fact, this is kind of an upbeat look. Dolly's coming to Broadway. That's really nice too.
Oh, what? That's always good news.
Yeah. So yeah, it isn't just it's predominantly right wing when it has a wing. Um, the other thing, you're going to have to interrupt me, by the way, if you want to ask questions.
No, no,
The
no.
other thing they do is pay for play, and that has been done. A local they make it clear, hey, this stuff is available if you want to run articles, and then you pay, and the articles appear for you as a candidate. By the way, I'm talking about political
Yeah, no, I get
candidates.
that.
Yeah.
Again, it's just striking me as weird because if it doesn't really have the circulation or the readership or whatever, then how is that money well spent from the campaign? You know what? I'm not a campaign
But
manager.
think about this, when that movie really sucks,
Hmm.
when the ad comes out, it doesn't say, New York Times said we're horrible. It says, you know, I was on the edge of my seat. And then the quote, like about that big, is some publication you've never heard of, and then
That's so
again,
true.
fascinating, my mom's blog, and so
I never
they
picked
get
up on
that
that.
too. Yeah, they get that out of it. Whether that's a business model yet, I don't know.
Interesting. Do you think the people who take part in these projects, meaning the people who, let's say if it's somebody who's either named in there, you're mentioning like if a politician wants to put something, do you think they know that they're taking part in a pink slime journalistic project?
Um,
Non-reputable journalistic
Yeah. Do you think they know? Do you think they know, or do you think a lot of people are confused by that and might not realize that they're taking part in something that isn't
Because for anyone who might
real
be listening,
journalism?
sorry, Dom, I don't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt, but for
No.
anyone who might be listening, the newspaper that you held up, if you're just glancing at it, it looks legit.
it does. It
Yeah, it
does.
totally. It like if I was
And
walking past in Bozeman and I was like, oh, that's okay, whatever.
and this one, I mean, this is that's some decent data viz they got going on there. That's something about Infrastructure Week, and they put some time into it. I looked at their sites and they do this for other states too. In other words, they
Oh,
have the data nationally and they compose the articles for the individual states. The reason I call them fake local is nobody is local. But
Okay.
Dom, you had a question and I've already moved on from it. What was
No.
it? Oh,
Basically,
do they know?
do people who partake in it, yeah, do people who partake, do you think they have any sense that they're taking part of something that is like, let's say that is pink slime journalism, or do they not know that it's not really local?
Let's say they see the offer and at that point may not know. But I hope the politicians of our great country are smart enough to realize about 5 minutes into this that it's all bullshit. And
Hmm.
because it's, yeah,
fingers crossed.
Jenna's crossing her fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm being
Recent displays have made me
magnanimous.
question some of like
Yeah.
just oh my God. Okay. All
Or
right.
maybe they see, oh, this might be legitimate. I can't be associated with this. Where's the illegitimate version of this?
Well, I mean, again, speaks especially speaking of politicians, it just makes me wonder but again, like if people aren't reading this as much, for example, we have in New York State, we've had our own story about someone who turns out wasn't really any of who they said they were. Of course, I'm talking about former Congressman George Santos, resigned in disgrace, blah, blah, blah. But a big
But that's
part of
Long
that,
Island, so you know.
okay, for the record, he said that, not me. But I will say a big part of that was that there wasn't the local news infrastructure there to really interrogate who these candidates were. And for a lot of people throughout the country, they live in areas where that's why people vote on party tickets, because I don't know who these people are. They have a R or a D or an I or maybe a WF for working families next to their name and whatever. And that's as far as the thought process goes when people are voting. So if
Well,
people like, could you take advantage, I guess, of something like this to help create an image of yourself? Because you could now point to an article that was, in the, what was it, Montana Independent, and be like, no, Montana Independent totally said I'm X, Y, and Z.
well, I mean, you've kind of hit the nail on that head because they present themselves as if, hey, newspapers are having trouble. We're here to fill in the gaps. And but I'm kind of data obsessive. So I compared where these places are to, I don't know if you know Penny Abernathy's work. It used to be called the Expanding News Desert. Now it's the Local News Initiative, but it shows where newspapers are and mostly where they're not. And these newspapers are not filling in gaps um, where there are no newspapers,
Mm-hmm.
especially no weeklies. A lot of times there's no dailies, but there's no dailies in a lot of places. So they say they're filling in gaps, but they really aren't. But it's funny you should mention New York because Penny works with data on a county by county basis, which is a good way as any to look at it. The trouble is, some counties have 88. There's a county in, I think, Hawaii or Alaska with 88 people, and a county in California with millions of people,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's another way to look at it. And New York City and its environs, if you look at it by um, uh, the population per daily, it's really low. It's as low as some of the rural places,
Wow.
especially if you filter out the nationals, the New York Times and the Post and things like that, which really don't have a lot of time for local news. They don't go to the city commission meeting like we hope that daily and even weekly were. So there's major population centers that are effectively less well covered than even some rural places because again Penny Abernathy's data is on a county basis. It's great, it's the best data out there, but there's another way to look at it. It's just harder but it's by population centers and see how much there is in a particular population. And I just know because that's one of the areas is the counties around New York City. And New York City, if you add, there's just not many dailies out there for
No,
that
I can believe
population.
that because specifically, I don't live in New York City. I live in the Hudson Valley, which is not upstate New York. But my point is,
It's half
that is a
half
hill
upstate
I
New
will
York.
die on. But my point, though, is that that's very, very true. I mean, once you are in maybe your Westchesters, your Rockland, and then you start going further north with the counties, you finding out what's going on locally gets harder and harder. And there certainly aren't dailies. And people have made the argument, well, there isn't enough news here to generate a daily or something like that. But at the same time, I'm also interested because you were saying that they have better websites than local newspapers. And since more and more people are getting their news, period, digitally, again, it's just like how is traditional journalism still getting outsmarted or
Yep.
outspent? I don't know what it is.
I- When I say when I say they have better ones, I really mean that theirs aren't horrible. They're not a pain. They're not a pain to navigate. They're not full of pop-ups and ads and things spread and just all kinds of they have a lack of design, but the local newspapers have whatever below that. a horrible design, as if it was purposely made to be unreadable. I had
Well,
all
I
kinds of
will
data on this.
say in my local newspaper's defense, because very early on in our podcasting journey, we spoke with a American University professor, Margot Seska, who wrote this fabulous book, Hedged, about how hedge funds are coming in and ruining local newspapers. And my local newspaper, I just recently, I was like, I know that hedge fund name. Anyway, so I'm gonna blame
Yeah.
them and not the local journalists who are doing their best, man. They're just trying.
You know, that is true. A lot of papers are actually profitable, but not what they aren't are profitable in a way that can make a stock price increase. And because this is all hedge fund, they just go in, and the hedge funds are the worst paper managers in the history of this species. And
I'm fairly certain that's what Margot said to us, right, Dom?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She said that and then some. Okay, but seriously though, because in listening to you talk, you've talked very clearly, passionately, engagingly about a lot of data information. And one of the things I found so interesting when I was looking up information about pink slime news, that's how I came across your website, IFFY News. And at first I was like, wait, what is this? But as I started digging into it, I found it fascinating. So tell me about IFFY News. Why did you start it? What's, driving you to do it? What is it there for?
So IFFY News was a COVID project. But if you want to back up, so like you said, I worked in radio forever, public radio, and we had a series, NPR series, and all that. And but I got a fellowship at RJI, a residential fellowship, and it's their fault. They polluted my mind, and I became, don't ever let this happen to you, concerned about journalism. Avoid that at all costs. And so I've been drifting into various technologies and data harvesting and things like that. And I
Hmm.
realized I could apply some of what I'd been learning to the newspaper industry. And the first thing I did was look at how fast newspaper sites are, and they aren't. They're slow, really slow. I think it was Eric Schmidt of Google said it's faster to read the newspaper than it is to get that site to load online. And so that was the first thing that got me into ad networks. And then I started thinking about misinformation. And I thought, I looked at the lists of fake news websites, and I kind of put them all together, established some parameters. Um, they have to be still online. A lot of these lists were unmaintained. But anyway, long story longer, basically, I realized that in my computer is the best, most vetted, most methodologically sound list of fake news sites. And that's when I started IFFY News. Again, during COVID, I had some downtime. Government sending me money. I thought, I can do something with the money. So I started IFFY News, which is basically a data set of fake news sites, domain level.
Hmm.
That it's all about the domain. And while it's not comprehensive, it certainly doesn't have all the fake news sites. Everyone on there has a high degree of certainty for being fake. And like I was doing, I thought other researchers, that's really its intent, is for researchers to
Hmm.
have a vetted list, which I update quarterly, of fake news sites. And I wanted it so anybody could do, nobody is doing what I'm doing, but anybody could. Here's the methodology, set your scripts on it, and boom, here comes every 3 months you get the data again.
Well, I feel like everybody these days has to be a researcher for one, in one way or another to verify, because again, there's so much, misinformation and disinformation coming at us, especially in the digital space. But Dom, I'll give you the floor.
Yeah. So last question we'd love to ask all our guests is, How did you become a journalist? What led you to journalism?
Oh, geez. When I got to Montana in 1977, I thought I'd go up the local college community station and see if do a music show, and it was really easy to get on, and they had public service announcements that were recorded. I started producing them, started talking to people that produce um, shows that I like nationally. They gave me an awful lot of help early. People like NEA started, I could get a grant, and all of a sudden I'm a radio producer, and there goes 40 years of your life. That's
Well,
how I got into it.
just real quick though, what's your take on the state of the industry now? Because I mean, journalism, we're down bad. It's not good.
So when you guys get jobs, is it going to be called hired and finding? I mean, what happens next? You you can't keep your current state just for the sake of the name of the podcast. So
Unless you've been talking to my mother.
I am a firm believer without data that what is pretty close to what has been. And I know things look bleak, but I bet they've always been kind of bleak. I do know that trust in journalism started falling around 1976. By the, Gap has been asking this question for a long time. And so I've been reading books like, All the President's Men, and that Hunter Thompson on the campaign trail, and this one called Boys in the Bus by Timothy Krause, to see what was happening in 74, 75, right around Watergate, and, to see if there's differences. I see slight differences, but a lot of people don't know that newspaper jobs have been falling since the late 50s. So obviously it is not entirely internet related. I think I'm not sure because I've never seen the data, but I think if you add all the various ways that we are journalists, like what you two are doing right now, I'm not so sure there's not as many journalists as we've always had. They're just not working at the local paper. So I know it seems bad, and I know this makes no sense, but it's probably always been like this, and will probably, within, close tolerances, probably always stay like this. I know that's not satisfying, but that's the way I think of it.
No, I think that's the most honest thing I've heard in a
Mhm.
while. Well, listen, Barrett, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a fascinating and exciting conversation.
I really enjoyed talking to you two. This was fun.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank
Barrett.
you. All right,
Great
well,
talking
we
to you
will
too.
speak again.
Yes.
All right, spotlight, spotlight, spotlight. So I went to one of the independent news outlets, the Free Press, which is an independent media company. And I was reading their bio. I'm sorry, I absolutely love this. Part of their bio says that they are, quote, building on the ideas that were once the bedrock of American journalism. And I'm here for the shade. I absolutely like that alone. I almost want to stitch that like on and put that on a pillow. The ideas that were once the bedrock of American journalism. Anyway, but yeah, props to Free Press. Anyway,
I
so
love it.
they have obviously a variety of offerings, but one of the ones that caught my attention very recently was I went to Karen's summer camp, and it's a rage ritual, might be the only place in America where the wrath of white women is welcomed. Now, having said that, few things. One, obviously, the whole notion of summer camp, we're entering into summertime, that did come to mind. One. Two is the idea of, and I've heard about, like the rage rooms and stuff like that, but a rage summer camp, and it's not that this is just for white women, it's just people within groups can speak better to other people within groups. And
Hmm.
so the person running this is a young woman, or younger than me.
Do you know? Do you know? Is this only so? This is only for women? Camp
Well,
only
no,
for
it's
women?
not. Well, I don't know if it's only for women, I should
Okay.
say, but it's run by this woman, Mia Benducci, who describes herself as a former New York City party girl turned spiritual healer. Hello. But I'm guessing that it's probably catering towards white women because when you're part of a marginalized group, even if that marginalized group is 51% of the population, you have a better chance at communicating directly with that group. So I'm guessing it could also be cost prohibitive. I don't know why this is speaking just, I don't think that this is just for white women only. And it doesn't say that per se in the article, at least not when I read it. I don't remember seeing that. But anyway, so um imagine a place where you're encouraged to or even required to let everything you've never held back out. And that's just my own take on the article. That's not what the writer, whose name I should actually name check, Olivia Reingold, actually wrote. But I do find that fascinating. Like, she does get into a little bit of the way that at least middle class white women are raised in America. And that is to a degree to be people pleasing, to be quiet, to be, you probably spent your childhood being spoken down to or whatever, because you're not here to necessarily be an equal. Your purpose is to, I guess, really, depending on where you are coming from, but to be some version of a helpmeet to your eventual husband. Uh, so that's got to be just like that's going to build up a degree of dissatisfaction and, of course, rage from years and years and years and years and years and years and years of just holding in your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions, etc. So anyway, the meetups can take place in person or virtually, but it's really, this woman Mia is really trying to help other young women, apparently mostly white women, um, not only acknowledge their rage, but to express it. And this is one place where I would say deviates from Black womanhood, because I'm sorry, there's just more rage to be had. And, and um, being in touch with that part of ourselves
Hmm.
feels much more authentic. I'm not saying that in Black spaces that Black women are 100% great at being able to, but I think because there's a higher degree of the aggressions and microaggressions that you're dealing with on a daily basis, that you either are better at dealing with your rage or finding an outlet for it, or maybe unintentionally letting it bubble out in inappropriate ways. But the point is that it's not the same way that white women have become very, very good at bottling it up. So it really gets into, the effects or the purpose of purging, which I do agree for everybody, because it's completely toxic to hold on to some of those really, really bad feelings for the purpose or for the support of civility, and putting that over your own mental well-being. And at one point, the author did describe the vibe, if you will, as Soul Cycle at Hogwarts, which I thought was really funny.
Love that.
But what I really liked about the piece was that, uh, you got a sense of what it was like to be at one of these, again, purge events, where you're able to let out your rage, and you kind of got an idea of what it was like. She includes some quotes from people who attended, either from the virtual sessions or, described what the in-person ones were like. But you never once got a sense of where the author actually stands. Like, I don't know exactly how Olivia feels about this, but I did get a sense of, what was going on in this like niche, I guess, mental health thing that people were doing. And I just thought that was really, really cool. Now, does that help in terms of other people? Because of course, the notion of a Karen is somebody who is
Hmm.
incredibly entitled and problematic, et cetera. And it probably has not probably, I'm sure it has a lot to do with a quote unquote Karen's own bottled up emotional issues. If Speaking as a Black woman, if you do not include that kind of purging work with some sort of education as to how not to be problematic, et cetera, in society, then I don't know if this really helps other people so much as it just helps these women feel better. But I am team like feel better and at least to get it out. So I just thought it was a fascinating piece.
Well, now, complete aside from this, but just talking about women and rage. So you know how I
Of
love
course.
my Vanderpump Rules, and
Ah,
that topic of
speaking
you
of
know,
rage for white.
but most people probably know, or if not, the story of Ariana Madix, who was she was in a relationship and her ex-boyfriend had he was her boyfriend, her then boyfriend had cheated on her for 9 months, and what was interesting, they started picking back up filming again like 3 months after the affair was exposed. And she was still angry. And it was interesting because whenever because of the fact that she was so angry, so many people used to be like, you need to get over it. So many people would just keep
Yes,
telling her, you
yes.
need to get over it. You need to get, and it was like, and
That's civility.
yes. And it was like, she has a right to be angry. And also was the fact that, you had a number of men on there and they made a point of on the show and even in life, let's keep this part real. Men can sometimes be aggressive and not even
Sometimes
aware. Yes, actually. But you see, like,
aggression doesn't, just to interject here, is
yeah,
that there's so many things. Like aggression isn't one of those things that shows up in like rah screaming and puffing out my chest or whatever. No, like aggression at its most insidious is when it shows up in microaggressions with the gaslighting, so that you're left being like, wait a
exactly.
second, am I crazy? Because I
Exactly.
am really upset, but the interaction that I had was so civil. I feel like I shouldn't be upset, but I am furious.
And
Yeah.
it happens so often. And just the fact that, at one point she said, how come it's okay for men to be, and I'm talking about aggressive, even in the way that they were speaking louder over
Oh yeah.
talking people. And yet, because she's this woman, she should just be get over it. And I thought, for me, I know it's a reality show and many people can poo-poo this and be like, oh, how could you watch that? But I really do think it showcases parts of our own. It's a reflection of what goes on in our society and how um, I think it's so important that women, and some men too, listen, I am definitely not, at least I hope I don't come across as being an aggressive male. I think that it's important for people to be able to release their rage and experience it and not bottle it up and not believe that you don't have the right to be angry at times. But obviously, again, separate from what you're talking about here with this, I mean, a little bit, I don't know everything about but at the same point, I just
Well,
think it
we're going to
brings up
include
the,
the link in the show notes.
yeah, but I do think that it's really, I just thought that just clicked to me of, I heard that. And I do think it's something that women have probably not have been.
We're definitely
I mean,
not taught as little girls,
no,
just across the board,
it's okay to be
that it's okay to be mad and how to express those feelings in a healthy
exactly.
way. We're mostly
Exa-
taught how to bottle it up. But I also think that's a very appropriate piece because, 2024 is a year where I think a lot of people are
mhm,
processing rage. And
mhm,
how do you do that in a healthy way?
exactly.
All right. Well, another week's show has passed us by, Dom. But thank you again to the audience, everybody out there listening, for again rocking with us, and we'll be back again next week. Laid Off and Looking is an independent podcast conceived of and created by Jenna Flanagan and Domenic Camia. Music provided by Jay Cowett, research by Lori Ruthenbucker. Reach out to us anytime at laidofandlookingpod@gmail.com. New episodes drop every Friday at noon.